Thanks everyone for joining us today. This is our 35th Graph Guru webinar. We're super excited that you're here with us to learn about the most important product release of 2020 for TigerGraph. No-code graph analytics to get insights from petabytes of data using TigerGraph 3.0. All right, so first I want to introduce myself. My name is Emma Liu. I'm a product manager at TigerGraph. I've priorly worked at Oracle as an engineer and at MarkLogic as a product manager. My current focus at TigerGraph is the cloud area, TigerGraph Cloud, and containerization, and also around enterprise infrastructure and monitoring, as well as connector ecosystem and containerization. So I have a passion in a complex system, and I'm very proud that have been working at TigerGraph and bringing graph analytics to everyone. And joining me today is Riaz Pasha. Riaz is a principal product manager at TigerGraph, and Riaz has extensive industry experience and had priorly worked at Workday, Hitachi, and HP. And Riaz has also worked in both engineering and product management leadership. Riaz has extensive experience in database management and also big data technologies. Riaz obtained his master's degree in computer science from University of Memphis. So it has been great pleasure working with Riaz on bringing TigerGraph 3.0 to the world. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So you're muted by default, but you can talk to us via chat in Zoom. And if you have questions, you can also submit through the chat and Q&A box, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. And this session is being recorded. So if you, after the webinar, we will provide a link to the recorded presentation. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Riaz.
Thank you, Emma, for the introductions. Hello, everyone. I'd like to first start off by thanking all the attendees for your interest in learning about how TigerGraph 3.0 can help with your graph analytics journey. But first, I want to start actually with some exciting news that we received this week at TigerGraph. We just learned this week that we're selected as one of the cool vendors in data management space by Gartner, the leading industry research firm. And this is a unique recognition because there's only 4 that are identified in this space and 2 in the US. So we're really excited and proud of this achievement. And this unique distinction actually speaks volumes of the sort of impact that TigerGraph is actually already having on the market and potential to provide graph analytics solutions. If you want to learn more about this, the detailed report, the Gartner report, is available on our website for download. That goes into more details into what are the new groundbreaking features that we have built in 3.0 that have helped make this selection. So originally not planned to start with this, but since we received some great news, I thought we should start with that. Next, I wanted to spend a few more minutes on the importance of graph in sort of today's analytics space, because the recognition you saw in the previous slide is not a one-off. It's actually part of a larger trend. Among the industry observers, there is a general consensus that there is compelling value of graph analytics. Graph is consistently listed as a top 10 technology trend in the last few years. You can see that in Gartner reports, in IDC, and other research firm reports. And the reason for that is because graph is by design, the data model is very conducive to performing analytics on connected data. And graph analytics has been there for a long time, especially in the academia with graph theory. They've been solving some hard problems. And in fact, even graph databases have been around for a while. But in the recent times, there's been a clear shift as to where people are noticing graph as an essential tool in their data management, in a data platform infrastructure. And the reason for that is businesses are no longer satisfied asking for basic questions of what happened previously. They want to learn about more on the future outcomes. That's where in the more advanced analytics space, what are the outcomes, what are the actions I have to take from a predictive or prescriptive nature to gain competitive advantage from a business perspective. And here graph plays a vital role because if you think about it, graph is basically an in-depth analysis of relationships. That be those entities could be organizations, people, transactions. So the goal of all of this prescriptive analytics is to get the hidden connections out, and for that graph is the ideal data store. And if you look at uh, the industry projections, Gartner clearly states in their trends in the last year that application of graph processing will grow at 100% year over year for the next few years. So obviously there is a lot of interest in the industry, and there's a lot of vendors. But the key question is now, will the graph vendors step up to deliver what's needed? Because if you think about it, there is still some ways to go before graph databases become more mainstream, and the analytics are more democratized for everyone to take advantage of it. We believe the answer is yes, and TigerGraph is answering that call with 3.0 by providing some of the features that make it easy for non-technical users or users who are new to graph to basically gain advantage in the business through various use cases. So I want to send now transition off into today's agenda. From a agenda perspective, we want to start with introducing the 3.0 version. As Sema mentioned, TigerGraph 3.0 is our major release for the year 2020. A lot of cool features have been packed into it. So I want to introduce that release. And then next, go into a little bit more deep dive into the core database features at the platform level as well as the database engine level. Next, I'll transition off to Emma to present the application features, the new enhancement that we've added to our Graph Studio application. And then last but not least, the one of the reasons why we are the cool vendors, which is the no code feature that we are championing as first in kind in the industry. Emma will do a deep dive with some demos to show how easily for users to get value quickly from our tool set. So on the before I go into the features themselves, I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on what are the design thinking behind building the 3.0 feature set. If you think about it, Diagraph 3.0 means we already have a compelling feature set available. You know, when we came out of the stealth mode in 1.0 and then 2.0, incrementally we have laid the groundwork for the industry leading graph database. We believe in terms of performance, in terms of enterprise level features, we are the best database product in the market. So our challenge when we were designing 3.0 was to basically take that leadership to the next level. Challenge was to pick uh, and focus on a few areas um, to make the product even more compelling. So our approach was to lay down the 3 design principles along which we will build those features. And those are first top of the list was ease of use, because we already have the functionality, we have the best performing database. Now, how can we make it easier to make it for users to quickly gain value? So with that in mind, the ease of use, how do we make it easy for non-technical users to quickly onboard, not only onboard, learn, but also bring in the data quickly and take the data out if they need to. So that the interoperability was one of the key things that we are focusing on. The second thing was, again, we wanted to make sure that the scale and performance was not something that we would let rest on our laurels, but actually build and continue to invest into it. And more importantly, for our customers, we wanted to make sure that they are not limited by architecture in terms of scale. We literally wanted to go from terabytes to petabytes, and a lot of our work that went into platform was to address the scale and that we don't sacrifice performance while we increase the scale. And the last thing, what we call is the better together. Basically, what that means is TigerGraph by itself is not on an island. We are part of a data platform ecosystem. We have to play well with other data systems. That way, the integration is as frictionless as possible. So that means interoperability wise, we need good ways to ingest data from other tools as well as export data to downstream applications. And the reason for that is because we are not there to replace a lot of the other systems. Customers have already made a lot of investments. They have built entire data infrastructure platform. So when we come in, we want to play nice with all the other tools and make sure that the investments that the customers have made are still, they can leverage and benefit from interoperability easily. So those are the three kind of focus areas we kind of decided at the high level. And as you will see through the presentation, the features that we go down, we have tried to show where the features fall in terms of themes. Next other way to look at it is, like I said, the product, the 3.0 product, um, I cannot overstate how it's a major release for us for 2020, right? So the features and enhancement that we have put in, they touch all areas of the product. And if you look at TigerGraph, basically it's a three-tiered architecture, TigerGraph product. We have the platform layer where all of the infrastructure, all of the close to OS cluster level operations, all of the internode communication happens. That's the platform layer. The layer above that is the database engine layer, where the heart of the database engine is, where query optimizer, the runtime, query graph processing engine, all of those reside. And then on the top layer is the apps, applications that we have built. So in terms of the feature area, we have not focused on one. This is a major release. There are features going into each and every area. I'll start at the bottom. At the platform layer, I said, as I mentioned again, I want to repeat, the scale of the platform is not limited now. It's not limited by architecture. It depends on the customer need. If they have a application that requires them to store petabyte of scale of data, we'll support that with 3.0. At the database engine level, we have added some cool features for the GSQL language improvements, as well as some engine improvements to enhance our performance and ease of use. And on the apps level, there are two areas we have built a lot of the features. One is brand new no-code tools to help bring the data in and analyze, as well as our existing Graph Studio application itself has gone through a number of key enhancements to bring parity to the database feature levels. So as you can see, there is all through the stack, from all the way from the ground up, we have made enhancements. And what does it translate in terms of benefits to the user? Again, this is important because as you attendees, the features are all cool, but what does the user get? Because that's at the end of the bottom line is that, right? So I want to touch on the specific benefits uh, that the users can get from 3.0. At the bottom level, at the platform layer, there are three actually personas that we typically target with our product. At the very bottom, on the operations and administration side, you have either the service reliability teams or database DBAs, database administrators. These are the guys who are behind the scenes who want to make sure that the cluster is running well, and from an OpEx operations perspective. And our focus has been on the platform type to make the operations overhead as small as possible, and also make sure we can inject performance improvements on the common day-to-day operations. That way, TigerGraph runs like a finely tuned machine, rather than with little extra overhead as possible. And what that means from a benefits perspective is, with 3.0, you can expect at least 10-time performance improvement on common cluster operations. This includes configuration management, installation, upgrade of software. All of these, because of the new architecture, are some ways turbocharged, or you can see a dramatic improvement. The second thing is we're introducing a brand new installer that allows you to have concurrent upgrades on all nodes at the same time. So if you are starting off with a small cluster, and if you grow over time, whenever we upgrade, now it's not going to penalize you in terms of the downtime. The downtime remains almost constant, and almost like a per node time. And the third thing is obviously the scale. If your data grows, you will not have to worry about re-architecting your application in any form or fashion. Everything is handled by platform. You just plug in new nodes, and we auto partition the data. We automatically distribute the data evenly, and your performance is almost linearly, it goes up. One step above, on the application development side, which is another persona where we're talking about data engineer, data scientist. For them, we've added some, obviously the visual tools from no code to improve the developer productivity. And also we've added some enhancement to the GSQL language itself that makes it easier for someone new to improve their productivity. That way their onboarding time is shorter. And then second thing is our Graph Studio application IDE itself makes it easier for you to have a quick, easy integration path from your iterative solution development phase to the production environment easily. A lot of the steps that are required to install query, to push to production, they've all been added with a view to make it easy for go from a DevOps perspective, from a dev to an operations mode, from a developer environment to a production environment. And last but not least, at the top apex, our third persona is the app users themselves. This is the business analyst. This is someone who wouldn't write a query. They are typically interacting with data, more to explore the data, or do a drill downs or final analysis. They're basically consumers of what the graph patterns that have been built by developers. For them, obviously, the no-code tooling is a key. Is in fact the main deliverable from this release that will help them get acclimatized to graph databases and graph analytics in general. And the second thing from app user perspective is we are providing some additional connectors. What that translates to is if they have downstream applications, for example, BI tools or other tools where they want to do offline analysis outside of TigerGraph, it all becomes easy because of some of the features we've developed in 3.0. Okay. Finally, I want to now go into look at uh, the release highlights, like feature highlights of what we are providing with 3.0. I want to start at the top with the application layer. First, we have two tools basically, which we in terms of the visual tools that are part of the no code movement. And you must have heard of this no code movement where there is a more and more applications want people, non-technical users, to quickly come in and get value from data analytic tools. As part of that movement, we are also providing these two key applications. One is the no code migration from relational database. And the reason for this is because a lot of our users who come to Graph come from relational background. So they have a notion of a data model that's more tabular in nature, columns and rows. For them to visualize things in Graph, it takes a time. It takes time to have the mental model switched where you're talking not in terms of tables, rows and columns, but rather in terms of vertices, edges, and so on and so forth. So to make the transition easier, we built this no-code migration tool that automatically allows you to access data from your RDBMS data store, uh, translate the schema into a graph schema, and then load the data. So all in with no code, with through just a drag and drop, click, point and click, you can get started quickly. The second thing is the Visual Query Builder, which is a tool that we are releasing. It is a very powerful tool that again empowers non-technical users to run graph queries. Here, visual medium is very intuitive in nature. Like what you see is what you get, kind of. You don't have to imagine when you write a query in terms of logic, is it correct, or what will my output would look like. In this case, when you drag and drop, you instantly see what's happening on screen. So that concept has now been captured in a tool and provided to the users. And this is really useful not just for beginners, it's also useful for experienced users, because if you think about it, when you write queries, it's an iterative process. It takes time for things to crystallize. So there, the turnaround time with actually writing the query can be a long. And with Visual Query Builder, we're trying to solve that problem by doing this in almost like real time, where user can see their actions, like if they filter out certain attributes, if they aggregate on certain attribute, how will the data look like, how will the output look like. So that immediate feedback loop is what we're trying to target with Visual Query Builder, which again we feel will close a vital gap in terms of expanding the user base for graph databases. Now, next, the key feature we have is the user-defined indexing. This is a very powerful feature, a performance feature that basically allows users to access key data attributes directly. What that means is when we build a vertex, there is a primary key column. And so index basically is based on that primary key access. Now, if your query pattern requires alternate attribute to be used in the query, you typically require a full vertex scan, which can be performance consuming. So by user-defined indexing, we actually allow you to do non-primary key access as well. And the way we've designed it is easy for folks who are coming from SQL to use it. It's modeled after ANSI secondary index feature. And again, moving on to the next feature, we have on the deployment side, there's a bunch of features we've added in terms of installers, in terms of export import, features that allow OpEx, as your data size grows, you're still able to get the same performance from the cluster operations. I wanna go again. Like I said, the 3.0 has a lot of features. The first slide was more about the key really highlights, but as you can see, we have more features in the GSQL engine side. We have things on Graph Studio enhancements like interpret mode querying, support for multi-graph. All of these Emma will touch on in the deep dive. And on the system management side, like I mentioned, installer, export utility, all of these features are there. I'll cover in more detail in the next section for each of the features. So let's go into the deep dive. I want to spend, before I go into the 3.0 features itself, I want to spend a couple of minutes on just to refresh folks who are new to TigerGraph and what TigerGraph brings from differentiation perspective. This slide I won't be able to do justice in one slide, but I still wanted to call out three key things, which are the key differentiators for TigerGraph now compared to the other database vendors, graph database vendors. One is the ability for us to do real-time deep link querying. This is very unique for us. For us, 5 to 10 hops, even more than 10 hops, is easy because of the way we have designed our product. It's all brand new implementation from the ground up. Our focus from the get-go has been about speed and efficiency, and all our the database is written in C++, which allows us to have very high performance. And basically, the benefit for the user, if you look at it, is if you can go deep 5 or 10 plus hop, then you can uncover really hard to find problems. And also the fact that our real-time performance allows you to use not only for analytics but also for operational use cases. So this is not just on analytics, but also it's a broad database for both transaction as well as analytics. The second aspect I want to touch on is the massive scale. Our database is based on the mass MPP architecture. What that means is that all of your data is distributed, auto-partitioned. So when your data size grows, you just add hardware and you're still able to able to get the same performance. And the way we store our data is also in a compressed format, which means your data is much smaller, has a much smaller footprint, which means you get access to all of the data. You can make better decisions because you don't have to have a choice between having data some on the disk, some in the memory. Having it all one place allows you to do quicker interactive analysis. And the last thing is, from an analytics perspective, um, out of the box in database, we provide you with the tooling to do the analytics. You don't need to rely on some other libraries. We have the GSQL language, which is a very high level language, but it's Turing complete. It's very extensible. You can add user defined functions and anything that you want from a regular querying, just as SQL is, you can extend based on inbuilt functions. That allows you to run any analytics in the database itself. In addition to that, we have a graph algorithm library that touches on most commonly used algorithms, which again, allow you to, without having to transfer data outside the database, you can run all of these analytics in the database itself. Um, and then I want to quickly spend a couple of minutes on the architecture, just as a refresher again. If you think about analytics as a use case, there are three key things. One, how do you bring in the data? How do you process the data? And how do you take it out for further down processing? From an architecture perspective, we allow all of that. We fit very well with the data infrastructures. We have different ways to talk to our database through GSQL query, or you can talk to our visual design tools, or you can directly access data through the REST APIs itself. So the data coming in or talking to the database, there are multiple ways depending on developer's choice. And then we have connectors to bring in data easily from, be it the master data, operational, any types of data you have. We have connectors for Spark, for relational databases. We have Kafka loaders to bring in data from upstream systems. And then we have connectors to downstream BI tools. We have connectors to other machine learning environment. That way you can easily do downstream analysis as well. And if you look at the core engine in the part right in the middle, you will see that it's basically a classic MPP database. It's built on the principles of industry-leading databases in terms of shared nothing architecture, which means there's no single point of failure. Everything runs in HA. If one service were to go down, automatically the the backup service takes over. So from a user perspective, there is no downtime. So from the ground up, the architecture is built for fault tolerance. All right, I want to switch gear and now go into the actual features for 3.0. The key feature from a scale and performance perspective is user-defined index. As I mentioned, this feature is modeled after secondary index feature in relational databases. From a functionality perspective, users can create an index on a vertex attribute or a range of values to get quick access based on their querying needs. And the way we have modeled the syntax is using alter vertex statement. So if you have a vertex, you write alter vertex add index statement to add or remove indexes. And from a syntax perspective, that's all you need to do. The DML operations or any other operations are implicitly they use indexes based on presence of an index. For example, if your predicates are on a particular attribute, the optimizer will check for indexes in there and then automatically pick the index for a performance boost. And in terms of the benefits, obviously it's a performance feature. It allows users to get high performance even when your query pattern changes. For example, if you originally designed your schema based on a few queries and your workload has changed over time, which happens with a lot of customers, then you are stuck with some great performing queries that are originally designed, but the new queries may suffer some performance drawbacks. In this case, when we add if your new queries are on a different attributes, you could change your indexing to match this to get the same performance. And our user defined index is basically designed with the same HA principles as the base vertices are, so, which means the indexes are co-located with our text distributed across the cluster. So from that perspective, even if a node were to go down, your access to index would still be available based on the same HA principles. So from availability perspective, that's a huge win for users. Performance impact, it's dependent on the selectivity of the predicate. So there's no one answer. But in our tests, in the most common use cases, we've seen tremendous results. Anywhere from some cases 50 to 100 times faster query performance. And we've seen that in our beta program with our early adopters, that the results have been really promising. And we're actually working on benchmarking to provide more concrete results. Those would be shared soon. And then another key question that always comes back with user-defined indexes is what is the overhead? And here I can share that the overhead is no more than 15%, both on the update query performance as well as the storage. It's in fact much less, but up to 15% if you really have a lot of indexes that you've decided to add. So our general guidance is to be judicious about how you pick where you want to create the user-defined index based on your querying patterns. And the next feature I want to talk about is the schema-flexible querying. So this is similar to your dynamic SQL if you're coming from the relational space. Basically, in 3.0, will allow users to write queries which are schema independent. So basically, developer writes adds values for vertex, edge, and attribute types in the query when they design a query. The user who actually invokes the query actually can supply those actual names for vertex, edge, and attribute at runtime. So what that means is, like previously in 3.0, I'm walking through an example here that uses shortest path algorithm. In 3.0, you would have had to write, like if you want to find if two people are connected, the social path person knows that's the name of the algorithm. If someone is writing between John Doe and Jane Doe, they would have to supply the actual names because it's a statically compiled query for predefined schema. In 3.0, we don't really have to create such as as a query. We can actually leverage the shortest path algorithm by supplying the name of the person and the relationship knows at runtime itself. What that means is then you can repurpose the shortest path algorithm for any use cases. You don't have to create a specific version for social path analysis versus customer vendor relationship or any other use cases you may have that leverage shortest path. You don't need to hard code it and create uh, multiple queries that essentially do the same thing. From benefits perspective, it improves developer productivity, and then it allows your code to be much cleaner. Because you're not creating uh, additional queries for the same use cases, and it allows easier collaboration between team members. They can share the common code easily. So from a user productivity perspective, we feel this is a really important feature. Next, switching gears to the system management side, this is more on the better together theme. We are adding export import tool. This is a brand new tool that will allow users to easily migrate one TigerGraph instance to another. Here, the interesting thing is we are giving flexibility to the user to transfer exactly what, like they can transfer all of the graph data or just the schema or just with user without user information. So there is this optional parameters allow you to use it as you see fit. Like in some cases, if you are trying to replicate a production problem, you may want to transfer the entire thing. But in some cases, you may just want to export only the schema and build out the data sets in another environment. So this makes it easy for, especially if you are trying to move data from TigerGraph into another downstream system, the same can be used because we basically export it as a CSV format. So that allows you to easily export and import. And as I said, this is from a benefits perspective. It's a good, easy integration with downstream applications. It can be used even for restore operations. For example, if your primary copy of the data, something has happened, then you can usually use the exported copy to restore. And also, if you want to test new versions of TigerGraph, this is an easy way to bring data from your production environment because you really don't want to test new versions on production environment. You can easily export data into a integration or a dev environment and quickly test that. And the next feature, the last one on the system management side, is the installer. We have a new installer that supports multiple versions of TigerGraph on the same cluster. What this means is upgrades now when you go from one version to another TigerGraph version, they do not override the existing installation. This support for in-place migration will allow you to have multiple versions to coexist. For example, if there's a new bug fix version available and you wanted to quickly check if that addresses the needs of your the issues, then you can quickly check, test on this with the same data, everything, and then if it doesn't, you can switch back. So you have flexibility to have multiple versions. And also this newer installer runs in parallel on all nodes. That allows you to basically, the performance basically becomes a constant time. So if you go from 10 node to 20 node, your installation time for any upgrades will remain constant. From a benefits perspective, obviously our key objective here is to reduce the overhead on the system management operations. And if you have any regression testing, anything you want to do, this will really help in terms of making it operationally easy for you to go from one version to another. And again, as I said before, it reduces the installation time for any cluster-wide upgrades for larger customers. So with that, I'm going to transition off to Emma to take over for the application features.
Thank
So
you,
I'm going to stop.
Rias.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
I am going to start sharing my screen. You can see my screen, okay, right? All right.
Yes, I can see.
Presenting. Yeah, so Rias has outlined our main foundational product focus on providing a robust and scalable and performant engine. And now let's take a look at all the no-code features, which brings the ease of use features and also really enables everyone to use graph analytics. As Rias mentioned before, we're working at this three-tier architecture, and now I'm going to talk about the first two for the app users and also application development. So here are the new TigerGraph 3.0 application features, which brings the ease of use and better together features. The first part is the no-code graph analytics. We have the new migration from relational to graph feature in Graph Studio. And we also added Visual Query Builder, which enables a drag and drop in Graph Studio to enable users to get graph insights through the patterns that you can drag and drop and compose. And the next part, we also have multiple enhancements in Graph Studio. First of all, we enabled the multi-graph support end-to-end workflow in Graph Studio. We also supported the secondary index. You can enable secondary index through Graph Studio. And the third part is we started to support GSQL interpret mode in 3.0. And this feature was already in the 2.4 release. And now we're going to start supporting in the Graph Studio. And the last part is internationalization, localization in the UI part. We're going to start supporting localization in Chinese. And last but not least, in Admin Portal, which is our web-based management portal, we started to support user management and license management as the first phase. Let's first look at the no-code graph analytics part. So first part of the no-code graph analytics is getting the data into relational databases, into TigerGraph from the relational databases. So developers who are familiar with relational database can auto-generate a graph schema, which will serve as the first draft for the TigerGraph graph schema. And it really simplifies the part of the data architect's ETL process. And we also make sure that we provide flexibility and agility for our users to customize and optimize their graph schema. There are many options that you can choose to optimize your schema design and also data loading design. And the second part is no-code analytics which completes the data querying capability to TigerGraph. And this is the no-code to migrate data. This is to no-code to migrate data into TigerGraph, and then no-code to query information out of TigerGraph. So before 3.0, developers need to write in GSQL queries. Now, with 3.0 Visual Query Builder, more business analysts, data scientists can query the database using drag and drop graph patterns. And there's no need to learn GSQL queries. Just think about a question in your head, and you can translate this inquiry into an executable query and get to the graph insights. For example, I want to find all the people who are friends of me and my managers in company X and Y. You can really decompose and think about how to leverage the vertex and the relationship and edges in the schema and compose that graph pattern. So Rias has mentioned the overall TigerGraph architecture, and I want to mention with TigerGraph no-code features, we have this new no-code data workflow. Basically, what you can do is from the relational data store, it can be imported into TigerGraph through the no-code RDBMS2 graph feature, and it can auto-populate the graph schema and import the data. And then through the no-code visual query builder, you can drag and drop and generate the graph patterns, and then also transfer the data and query results into the downstream analytics, machine learning, visualization, and other tools. And of course, for the no-code visual query builder, it can also work on the data that's not going through the migration path, but just through the normal ETL data loader. And who we are really designing for are these 4 groups of experts. Data scientists who are really transitioning, data architects who are really transitioning from RDBMS to TigerGraph. And you just want to have a first draft auto-generated graph schemas and automatically loading the data into TigerGraph. And the second group is developers who are learning and using TigerGraph and GSQL and want to reuse the graph patterns. Visual Query Builder, when you draw the graph patterns, the GSQL queries are actually automatically generated at the same time. And then we're also looking at the business analysts who just really want to explore the common graph analytics through the patterns without learning GSQL. And also, of course, the data scientists who want to examine the graph features for graph learning models, machine learning models. So for Visual Query Builder, it's very easy for data scientists to draw these graph features and leverage them in their machine learning models. All right, just a little bit deep dive into the no-code graph analytics. First, a migration from relational to graph. Again, it's very user-friendly and enables a very speedy transition. So what are the steps? Step 1, you can choose the relational data store that you want to migrate. And then step 2 is select the tables and attributes to migrate from each of the relational schema that you want to look into. And step 3 is load the data from relational data sources. And step 4, you can customize and optimize the graph schema and change the vertex and attributes as you like in Graph Studio. All right, now I'm going to go into a live demo showing how the no-code migration from relational to graph works. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and go into the live demo that I already set up before this presentation. All right, okay. This demo is actually set up in my local Docker environment, and there is a relational database that's already set up in our data center. I'm currently connected through our VPN. So there's a connection between the relational database and the Docker environment I set up on my laptop environment. All right, this is the Graph Studio SDK. If you're not familiar with TigerGraph, this is our developer SDK. And this is a new addition, the look and feel. You can see there's a global view here. And if you click, there's no graph in the system. Now, I'm going to click on migrate from relational database, choosing relational database type. Next, input the connection information. We have the server information here to in our data center, and the port and the database is Northwind. So I'm demoing the very traditional Northwind database, and username, password. All right, clicking next. And now it is connecting to already generated all the retrieved information from relational databases, and the tables and attributes are here. So I'm going to just choose everything here and click next. And now the new graph name is here, and we'll create an index from attributes and from the relational database. And here I'm just going to choose, let's say 100 lines and start migrating. During this process, it's basically converting the relational schema to the graph schema using the logic that we put in the back end. So it will take a few seconds since this is a live demo. And now we are actually transferring the data from relational database to TigerGraph instance. Also automatically mapping the data from relational database to our TigerGraph data mapping. Now it's publishing the data mapping in our system. Once it's done, we'll be able to see from the left panel. As you can see, this is the logical workflow for us. First, you design a schema, and then the next map the data to graph, and then load the data. And the next 3 panels, you can explore the graph. It's a you can quickly explore, see what are different vertex and edges have in them. All right, now it's already migrated, and let me just verify. Yes, as you can see, we have this new graph schema here from the Northwind database. Customer demo, customers, employees. All right. And actually you can also do a quick search, and shippers are here. Next, let me just leave. Go to map data to graph. You can see that all the CSV files that generated from the relational database are here. It's mapped into the edge and vertex here. Everything is automatically populated. Next step, let's load the data into the TigerGraph format. And let's start and continue the data mapping. And in this page, you can actually see the progress of all the data loading. And as you can see, if you zoom in, some of the data CSV file has already been loaded. I just want to point out that I'm actually working in a Docker environment, so it's not a very powerful instance. So normally the data loading happens a lot faster with a more powerful machine. So you can see the data is being loaded here and track the progress here. Let's just wait a few seconds. And with more data loaded, I can already explore the data. Okay, some of the data is still being finished loading. And I'm just going to start exploring while the data is loaded. And let's just pick 5 vertices. Okay, you can see that let me first hide the original data set and pick the vertices. All right, now you can see some of these data set is already here. Okay, so this is a short demo for the migration from relational to TigerGraph. Now I'm going back to my presentation and introduce other features. The second part of no-code graph analytics is a visual query builder. And this is a very exciting feature that we introduce a paradigm shift to how we actually look into the graph analytics. As I mentioned before, it's a very intuitive approach to graph analytics, and it really decreases the learning curve. And what are the steps to build graph patterns? Step one, first you come up with a question and analyze your inquiry. You can really break down and to see what are the entities and relationships in your question and inquiry. And with that, you can pick and merge the vertices and edges that actually corresponds to the entities and relationships. And in step four, you can add filters, aggregations, all these conditions if it applies to your inquiry. And step five, you can output and verify your results. Now, let me just get into another live demo to show the Visual Query Builder. I'm going to, again, going to another demo environment. I want to point out that this demo environment is, I set it up on an Azure instance. So you can definitely run TigerGraph through the marketplace and also install your own package on any of the cloud instances. Now, this data set is pretty simple. It's a enterprise social network. You can see there's a person, school, city, company, and all these edge information. Work at CEO. Again, going through the flow, map data to graph. It's already mapped here. And I've already loaded the data here. As you can see, it's a relatively small data set. And let's just go directly to build graph patterns. I've prepared a few of the demo queries. And let's go to the demo one. It's a very simple graph pattern here, actually demonstrates there's a person vertex here. And this query is actually trying to answer the question in 2019, who are the people in this data set that's less than 30 years old? So as you can see, we actually have this output glow here in orange. That means we'll output those results from the data set. Let's run this demo. Okay, you can see that in this data set, we have 4 people that satisfy this inquiry. Now, let me just show quickly that I see that in the chat, there's people asking whether there's GSQL queries. So if you click here, voila, these are the GSQL queries here that you can save and run again in the right queries. So here we actually have this demo 1 saved, and you can run in the new right queries pattern. All right, let's go back and to show just one more pattern that's actually shows a graph feature that's looking at the results that whether you can find person X who are friends of person Y, and person Y is friends of person Z, and whether they're satisfied the information that this person Z actually managed person X. So let's just run this pattern quickly. Voila, we've identified this result, and you can see that here is the outcome of this inquiry that we just constructed through this graph pattern. Okay, let me, this is a very simple demo, and there are a lot of queries that we've constructed for the example data set. And you can see when we publish 3.0, there's a lot of documentation that will help you to learn how you can construct and drag and drop using Visual Query Builder. And we will also have a webinar at the end of June that demonstrates more in depth how you can actually construct a query. I also want to come to this. Everybody, if you want to see some of the queries that we've demoed, you can actually come to this no code page. And there's already pre-recorded videos showing the no-code migration video and also the visual query builder video. So definitely take a look. And here's also the list of features of FlipStudio 3.0. Let me just go back to the demo here. Next part, I'm going to quickly go over some of the enhancements in Graph Studio. First part is the TigerGraph MultiGraph service. We started to support in 3.0 that in Graph Studio, you can actually work through the MultiGraph support, design and leverage the feature from end to end. So MultiGraph is an innovation we're especially proud of in TigerGraph. And we have supported this feature for more than 2 years. Prior to 3.0, people can use this feature through the command line. And it really enables people to have different global graphs and local graphs to accommodate for different departments. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see that we supported the global view and also a local graph. So you can actually look at, design multiple subgraphs under a global graph. I also, if you remember earlier, I demonstrated that this feature is already in the product. All right, next part I want to quickly mention about GSQL interpret mode. Again, this feature was also supported in TigerGraph 2.4, and now we're starting to support from the Graph Studio side. What it means is, by default, from 3.0, the Graph Studio GSQL query will be run in interpret mode. And this really helps developers to really go through query iterations faster, and also allows multiple users to work on Graph Studio and writing GSQL queries without compiling the GSQL queries. And it just brings a lot of convenience for developers. And of course, if you are satisfied with your queries, you can install the query and run the queries in installed mode. And in installed mode usually brings a little more performance benefits. Again, here, this is the interpret mode in GSQL queries. And you can see here that you can run query in interpret mode, and this will automatically, by default, run the query in interpret mode. Next part, this is a quick screenshot for the localization for Chinese. And we're very excited that our Chinese customers can start using the UI, looking at all the localization in Chinese. We will expand to other language area as the internationalization is also done at the same time for the UI framework. And as Riaz mentioned before, on the engine level in 3.0, we started to support secondary index. And it's very convenient in Graph Studio to turn on the secondary index for the attributes you want to. And it definitely speeds up the query performance. And also here, it really hides the design complexity. You can just one-click enablement. Again, last but not least, I'm going to talk about the admin portal improvement. There are two admin portal improvements. The first one is we enable the user management in the admin portal now. This is the web-based user management, and you can create and assign users and privileges. And then the next part is the license management part. And you can enter your license in 3.0 through admin portal. And there's a lot of information regarding what the types of license it is and what kind of applications it enables, and also the topology limit. All right, this brings the end of the presentation. Just quick summary, why we should use TigerGraph 3.0 and what is the exciting part. And Riaz has alluded that these three pillar area is what TigerGraph is designing for in the past years and also going forward. For with the user index defined indexing and also the easier deployment, really enables us to accommodate to the large data set with performant graph querying. And these two features really enables the scale and the modern data management requirements. And then the no-code visual query builder and schema-flexible querying, it also brings the performance and also ease of use. And more users can start to get benefits of graph analytics. And the next part is the Graph Studio SDK improvements. It brings the ease of use to our users and also the no-code migration to relational database to graph. This really works well with all the ecosystem framework that we are connecting to with TigerGraph. I just want to end the presentation today with a quote from a distinguished engineer at Fortune 10 healthcare company, which really motivates TigerGraph to move forward with product innovation and bringing graph analytics to everyone. So we strive to provide graph analytics in a more accessible way in both our cloud platforms and also in the no-code data migration and graph pattern analysis. And TigerGraph Cloud simplifies your IT infrastructure process, and the 3.0 no-code graph analytics really simplifies the entire data workflow. It really provides an end-to-end simple workflow for more audience, such as business analysts and data scientists. So among the many impactful use cases, we're also very excited that we have really improved the TigerGraph 3.0 product and enables that to solve the world's most challenging problem. And I'm very proud that we are releasing TigerGraph 3.0 and bringing an even larger impact to the world. With that, let's come to the question and answer. All right.
Right. Thank you, Emma. I see some questions already in Q&A that I think you answered and I answered. Do we want to?
Yeah, let's just rephrase a few of the questions in Q&A.
Okay. One, I think the couple of questions were on the Graph Studio side, like I think you alluded to them, like will GSQL query be available when we create graph patterns? The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate, Emma?
Yeah, so as I demoed earlier, the GSQL query is actually automatically generated, and you can also save the GSQL queries, and you will be able to see that query in the right query panel.
Yeah, and then the second question is related to the no-code RDBMS loader, data loader. The question was about, what other databases do we support? Right now we are supporting MySQL and Postgres, but we are planning to add other databases to the list. It's fairly simple in terms of as long as they have ANSI SQL semantics built in. So you want to elaborate anything more on that?
Yeah, I think that answers the question. We're definitely, expanding to more of the relational databases and also other type of data warehouse and data marts, anything relational.
Yeah, and there's one question here about, is there a change data capture approach for the relational database import, basically related to the same no-code data migration tool? Are we doing a one-time capture or do we support CDC basically?
So at the current stage, we're supporting one-time import. However, we're definitely looking down in the roadmap that potentially supporting the data change.
Yeah, then a couple of questions on when 3.0 will be available. Very key questions. I can take that. 3.0 is already in beta with select customers, and we've been getting some valuable feedback. For the GA release, we are working through the final release preparations. Our plans are to release by end of second quarter, which is end of June. That's the plan of record right now.
Okay, With that, I think
Yeah,
we're 5 minutes over.
5 minutes over. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
we went a little bit over, but we hope you found the presentation useful. And do you want to switch the slide to, yeah. If you have more questions, we have a vibrant community. We have a very enthusiastic developer evangelist. He's always ready to answer any questions you have. And then we have our own developer chat on Discord. And then we have office hours where if you have questions, if you pre-submit, we'll have our experts, engineers come in and answer your questions. That's a weekly office hour that's available. And then obviously TigerGraph Cloud is where you should start your journey. It's an easy way to get started. And then we have a couple of upcoming exciting webinars that are scheduled. Actually, the next one is tomorrow itself. It's hosted by EDM Council, Fighting Fraud in Uncertain Economic Times. Victor Lee, who's our head of product strategy, will be participating in the webinar. And then the next one in the series of TigerGraph Gurus is 36 episode. This actually is a deeply technical webinar that goes into GSQL writing best practices. This is part 3 actually. So it's a series of webinars. We've conducted 2 already. So the next one is scheduled for June 3rd. All right, with that, we are pretty much end of the presentation. And do you want to add anything, Emma or Emily?
No, we'll send the recording out to everyone. And if you have any questions that we didn't answer, you can go ahead and reach us through the links that we're going to send you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
And stay safe. Bye.